Greetings, my name is Pete Ring. My background is in military aviation and in particular fighters and choppers. I do these chats on behalf of Air Force Association New South Wales and on behalf of Wings magazine and also for our Wings Australia YouTube channel. Could I also ask that if you like our videos then please subscribe to our channel and have a look at the description on our channel for this video and you'll find links to subscribing to our magazine called Wings and subscribing to Air Force Association New South Wales. Today I'm chatting with Group Captain Tim Ireland. Tim's background is he was recently an F-35A mission instructor and a mission commander. But today I want to chat to him about Operation OKRA, which was during his 2015-16 deployment to the Middle East region in those years. Tim flew more than 50 missions and 350 combat hours over Iraq and Syria. Now, that's the background, so greetings, Tim.
G'day, Pete.
I want to keep about the first 4 or 5 questions brief, just to set the scene. But what was Operation OKRA, just briefly?
So Operation OKRA was the Australian contribution to Inherent Resolve, which was a coalition effort to support the Iraqi government to expel ISIS or ISIL or Daesh extremists from Iraq and Syria.
Oh, that's nice, thank you. And what squadron were you flying with at that stage?
So I deployed twice on Operation OKRA, both times with 75 Squadron
Right.
flying the F-18.
Well, I used to be an FCI at 75 Squadron, so I've got quite an attachment to that. And you were flying the F-18, as you said. How many RAF aircraft were deployed up there at the time?
So Air Force deployed
F-18s.
just the F-18s. We deployed six aircraft were permanently there throughout Operation OKRA, and we typically flew about 4 missions a day, either as a 2-turn 2 or a 4-turn 0.
Okay, and there were other aircraft from the RAAF. What were they?
Yeah, so we were part of an air task group. So there were other Air Force contributions to the mission. They included KC-30 refueling aircraft, the E-7, which was used as a surveillance and command and control node over Iraq. And also there was air transport throughout, obviously, the couple of decades that were there, but they were an important part of the task group as well, with C-130 and C-17 sustaining the fight.
So we were there a long time. When the F-18s came home, the other detachments remained up there.
Yeah, that's right. The strike element, which was the F-18 contribution, both with the Super Hornet and the Classic Hornet, was just one part and one small part of the entire operation.
Yeah. Okay. What was a typical weapons load without being too specific, like in the sense of air defense weapons and ground attack weapons?
Yeah, so every mission that we flew, we'd have a full gun pack, so 578 rounds of 20 mark, and we'd also carry short range and medium range air-to-air missiles for self-defense. And outside that, we were able to tailor our air-to-surface loadout, our bomb loadout for the particular mission. But amongst the suite of weapons, we typically used a variety of warhead size from 2,000 pound as our largest warhead, all the way down to 500 pound. And we had a low collateral, so a smaller warhead option in that bomb case as well, which was good at reducing collateral effects when we were dropping weapons in urban areas. All of the weapons were GPS guided, and some the GB54 also had a laser guided option.
Right. It's funny, way back when I was flying, the maximum size weapon really we could carry was a 500 pounder. So times have changed a bit there with the weapon load of the F-18. And
Mm.
just briefly, what was your approximate mission duration, like in general terms?
Yeah, that was probably one of the notable aspects of our missions in Ocra. We were based in the UAE, a reasonable distance, at least 2 hours from Iraq itself. So that made our mission lengths extraordinarily long. And on average, they're around 8 hours long. Some were shorter than that if we're doing more of a deliberate strike mission where we didn't have to loiter long. But otherwise, we planned it to have about 3 hours of on-station time in Iraq. And sometimes, as we were coming home, if there was fallout across the coalition, we were sometimes asked to extend. So some missions were just short of or around 11 hours long.
Wow. Did you did you find that extraordinarily different in the sense of just your general background?
Yeah, that really drove the way we prepared for the operation, and was a key part of our workup. Was working through exactly how to sustain our focus, our how to maintain our nutrition and hydration for that long, because the cockpit is quite small, especially in a single seat Hornet, where you can't get up and move about. So it became a very much an exercise of organisation in the cockpit, and sustaining yourself for long periods of time. I sort of equated it to, not that I ever did, but playing Test cricket, where you only have to focus for a short moment,
Yeah,
which might be whilst you're on station and conducting a strike. And outside of that, you had to find ways to relax your mind, relax
yeah,
your body, and maintain nutrition and hydration for the length of the mission. My first deployment, I found I was starting to have, and a lot of the pilots were having issues with their sciatic nerve from sitting down for so
yeah,
long.
yeah,
Uh, and being strapped in and not being able to move. So we looked to adapt to that by um, unstrapping when we weren't in danger and over Iraq. So we did a lot of the mission unstrapped, which was abnormal for us, and having to
wow,
have procedures around our the state of our ejection seat, etc., for that. Also, I'd carry a cushion so that once I checked out post mission, unstrapped, I could sit on a cushion and just provide some extra relief, and some preparation on the ground before and after mission to stretch out our lower bodies.
wow. Something I've never experienced in my life, except sitting in the back of the C-130.
Yeah, it's certainly not something we thought we'd ever have to do. So yeah, it took a lot of preparation, and we even got advice from defense scientists and aviation medicine scientists on the sorts of foods we should avoid and should be eating, and exactly how we would program our nutrition and hydration.
Lots of self-discipline in the sense of taking, being able to handle that long in the seat. Um,
Yes, yeah.
Generally speaking, without getting too specific yet again, what sort of missions did you fly and what sort of targets?
So um, the missions were pretty much fell into two categories. They were either a deliberate mission where it was a pre-planned strike, usually using or a multinational strike across the coalition, all joining on a similar target area at the same time. Um, or most of the missions were dynamic in nature, where we were literally um, on station above the fight and providing on-call air support to the ground forces. Uh, Between those missions, the deliberate strikes were mostly against buildings and facilities. They might be known defensive positions, barracks of Daesh fighters, weapons caches, etc. The dynamic the dynamic targets could really be anything from equipment to um, close air support in the middle of a firefight on the ground where we're dropping bombs on snipers or firing positions, all the way to buildings, weapons caches, etc., that were being found at the
Um,
time.
the rules of combat that you just briefly again, just a summary of the rules of combat that you might have had to comply with while you were there.
Yeah, so our rules of engagement, uh, the details of those are classified, but are
Okay,
derived from the laws of armed conflict.
okay,
And that's another aspect that I found very interesting during the operations, was just the levels of support that we had, both at our operations center, which sat outside Iraq, which was monitoring each mission. They could even see our targeting pod footage in real time as well, plus had all the extra feeds. So in the operations center, we had a pilot operator who was clearing each strike with legal support, intelligence support, and targeteering. Um, Through to post-mission, each of our strikes was again reviewed by legal support to ensure that we were abiding by our rules of engagement and doing things in the right way. Um,
very
but
complex.
but yeah, at all times, each strike was very deliberate in its approval, um, and at all times, under laws of armed conflict, there had to be a clear military advantage to conducting the strike, and it always had to be proportionate, and we had to be using distinction in our application of force.
In regard to the other military forces you mentioned, uh, what 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 nations and what sort of aircraft generally? Not I mean the combat aircraft rather than the support aircraft.
Yeah, from a strike or bombing perspective, uh, the biggest contribution came obviously from the United States across their armed forces and services. So we had everything from B-52s, B-2s, B-1s,
Wow.
all the way down to F-22s, um, F-15s, F-16s, F-18s, out of off the boat in the um, in the Gulf as well. So there was always fighter planes and bombers in the air from the US side. Obviously, ourselves contributing. The UK were flying Eurofighters. Uh, some of the Middle East countries were involved. So Jordan and Saudi Arabia were contributing. The Iraqi Air Force itself was flying strike missions, as well as Turkey. And the French were flying Rafales and Mirages. So yeah, it was a true coalition, multinational effort over Iraq.
Well, I suppose what enters my head immediately is all those nations contributing into the one pool. Um, was there a lot of uh, effort had to go into coordinating, into collaborating to make sure that you each got the proper airspace to carry out your mission?
Yeah, it was complex. It was a very busy airspace. It was all coordinated through the Combined Air Operations Center, um, and there were very strict rules and protocols that we had to abide by, so that to ensure that we're all deconflicted from each other and from each other's weapons. But yeah, very procedural in its nature, while ensuring we had enough flexibility to maneuver around the airspace and around the fight as we needed to.
Um, that would have been different too for F-18 operations in Australia. So that would have been very
Mm.
interesting. Um, was there any enemy opposition in regard to the air power? Was there any air to surface or any other um, defences that you had to cope with?
Not notable in the air
Okay.
defense. So we felt pretty secure uh, in our operations, particularly above our sort of safety heights in our tactical floor. However, we knew that Daesh had access to surface-to-air missiles, but the assessment was pretty much that they were trophy weapons and were unlikely to be used, especially against fighter aircraft. They were more of a threat to helicopters in the lower levels, or UAVs.
So did you have any use for forward air controllers?
Yeah, so the ground fight was, and the air support to the ground fight was organised through joint terminal attack controllers, so jtacs, or what used to be forward air controllers. So they operated out of a couple of operations centre themselves, and they had communication links into the Iraqi forces on the ground so that we could make sure that we knew where our blue forces were, and we were deconflicting our weapons and fires to assure we weren't there were no instances of fratricide, etc.
That would have been complex as well.
Yeah, and I guess the technology of it all really came to the fore again. The fact that the jtacs would have a live feed of our footage, so they could see what we were seeing, really helped expedite target identification and getting weapons down efficiently.
And what were the pressure points or dangers in a typical mission? I'll ask you some more direct ones after this one, but what were the things that were in the back of your mind when you got airborne as far as coming back home again?
Yeah, I think the biggest threat was fatigue and focus,
Okay.
which we've already just
Yeah.
spoken about.
Yeah.
Because as you know, like a fatigue pilot is one that's likely to
Yeah.
not be able to follow all the deconfliction procedures, etc. So that could lead to collision. So and the amount of traffic overhead, Iraq and Syria was immense. So they were the probably main threats. The always in the back of your mind was you didn't want to end up on the ground through ejection or whatever. So anything that could lead to that, whether it be a problem with the aircraft where you lose power and have to eject, or a collision, they were the I guess the worst case scenarios for pilots on the ground. And before we deployed, obviously, in I think it was in around January 2015, we'd all witnessed the Jordanian Air Force pilot get burned in a cage by Daesh, as an example of what fate was ahead of us if we did end up on the ground and captured. So that was a present fear, and I guess a real danger that we were always mindful of and planning around our actions on if we did end up on the ground.
So without going into detail, because that also might be confidential, but did you have specific, if you did eject, did you have very specific plans once you hit the ground?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. Generically, we underwent, or we've all undergone escape and evasion training, etc. We updated ourselves on those procedures, and we had plans generically for that theatre on what we'd do. There was again amazing technology and support in recovery and being able to recover a down pilot that gave us confidence as well. And that support was applied to particularly deep missions in deliberate strikes where they'd even stage recovery assets to de-risk an escape or an evasion type scenario. And outside of that, every mission that we flew and we knew what area we were flying to, we would run through our desired ejection areas, etc., and how we'd want our wingmen to act and support us on the ground if we did find ourselves there.
That's very detailed. So can you just think about a mission or two that stood out for you from the others that you might have flown there, just to illustrate the pressures and the the way you had to handle the current situation? Is there anything that stands out, or one or two of them that stand out?
Yeah, there's lots of very clear memories. Probably the first and probably the most notable for all of the pilots on ops, I guess, was my first weapon. So my first mission was a deliberate strike. It was up near Mount Sinjar. I was the mission command. It involved French Air Force as well. Um, and it was a relatively simple strike, but we put a lot of detailed planning into it. The target itself was a transport hub for Daesh, so essentially a you know a vehicle depot, but it was beside a major highway in the north of Iraq. So we were very conscious of avoiding civilian casualties and damage outside of the target area. Hence, it required quite a detailed scan of the area with our sensors to approve each weapon drop over about 5 to 10 minutes. Um, and all that planning was fantastic, and I guess all the training that you have enables you to do that planning and get yourself to that position. But the adrenaline, there's nothing that can stop the adrenaline of actually clearing your mate to drop and taking that responsibility and then dropping weapons yourself for real, where you know the consequences can be quite grave if you get it wrong. The second mission that I can probably share with you was in my second rotation and in support of the Battle of Mosul. So we'd been flying over Mosul for weeks, supporting the ground forces there as they cleared Daesh of the city. But what was notable about the flights over Mosul was just the density of air support in the stack. So we had UAVs below us. Um, we had heavy bombers aloft and other fighters, probably 4 or 5 other pairs, either above us as well, to the point where we were conducting a strike or preparing to conduct a strike in quite complex urban terrain with Daesh fighters in the streets, and we were restricted. Ordinarily, we'd fly with an altitude band so that we could offset our altitude from each other in case we got busy in the cockpit. So just to de-risk, I guess, the risk of collision. But on this occasion, the jtac didn't give us an altitude. It was the first time we'd seen that, where we both had to fly at co-altitude, which added a complexity and I guess a workload to our formation to deconflict from each other whilst maintaining custody of the target and getting weapons down and supporting those in. And that was it was a successful strike, and I just remember the workload in having to do that was notable, and there's a great sense of achievement. So yeah, there's a couple of clear memories of mine, fond memories of mine from those operations.
So if you went back to the C and B scene era that you've flown yourself in, how much of that was a little bit of you just told me about C and B scene? Was there a lot of that in the overall 6 months or whatever you spent up there at both times? Was there a lot of that need for C and B scene? Not just ordinary airmanship, but that essential element of C and B scene.
Yeah, absolutely. We never flew alone. We always flew with mutual support. Most of the missions were basic pairs, and some of the strikes were 4 ships. But yeah, the main threat, as I said, was collision, and
Yeah.
we're always in the
Yeah.
lookout for fires coming from the ground, from small arms, etc. So it was about knowing where your wingman was, scanning below them for threats and around them for threats, so you could alert them to a problem, while also flying yourself accurately for both your ability to employ your targeting pod to scan, do reconnaissance and find targets, and or to employ weapons yourself. So it was a constant dance of scanning outside the cockpit for threats, for mutual support, and inside the cockpit for accurate flying.
So did that fashion your flying techniques or flying um, environment for the rest of your? Does it still fashion your when you're flying today? Does that still fashion your thinking because it was so intense up there?
Absolutely, but I guess as you'd appreciate it, it's been a cornerstone of our training for valid reasons. It's a constant requirement in tactical air combat, that you both need to be able to fly accurately under pressure while also supporting your formation to be able to defend at any notice, and also alert to danger, so that your mission continues.
Mm. Would have been very tiring. No wonder you probably undid your harness on the way home when the time was right and sort of sat back a little bit and had a little rest.
Yeah, the missions, you know, I guess combat can be boring. There's many hours where there was nothing happening, particularly throughout the night or as the sun was rising. So there was plenty of time for your mind to wander off because it was very quiet. But there was always that constant pace of a mission. We had to refuel every hour because we maintained fuel to get out of Iraq if we had a problem. Um, and so there was a constant rhythm to the mission of being on task, transiting to a tanker nearby, getting fuel, and then returning to continue the mission overhead.
It sounds like your access to the tankers was quite uh, not easy, but quite convenient and quite reliable.
Yeah, it was another threat and could be a pressure. So you knew if your tasking order in particular had you bouncing between many different tanker assets in one mission, that it was going to be a busy day because you might be flying all around Iraq looking for fuel. But the best missions were the ones where we were fragged with the Australian tanker, to be honest, both for their level of support, the equipment they had, including Link 16 on board, so they could they could sweeten the intercept when you were
Uh,
coming for gas, and they had a sense of urgency, knowing that we wanted to minimise time on the hose. And also just simplifying the mission, that we didn't have to do a tanker rejoin on the way up the Gulf as well, was they were the best missions when you had a KC-30 for the entire mission.
and what was roughly the hose on the hose time? Roughly speaking, how long did it take on the hose to fill up?
Yeah, from memory it was about 1,000 pounds a minute sort of fuel rate. So uh, we'd be on there for say 5 to 6, 7 minutes at a time.
Was that
Um,
intense?
that became easier. The most feared tanker um, was what we call the Iron Maiden, the KC-135, which has a boom out the back and then a very small hose for drogue, and well, for fighters equipped with a probe, which the Hornet is. And that was always a bit of a fear, but we got so used to tanking, and particularly on that aircraft as well, that it became very much second nature.
It's really good. I love the idea of being able to top up while you're up there doing the job. Um,
Yeah,
in the old days, when I approached the target, the bomb accuracy depended on the angle of the dive, how accurately assessing what angle of the dive we're in. It depended on accurately keeping an airspeed on the way down, and it depended on an accurate release height. So that was the tradecraft in not only identifying the target, but then positioning yourself, because the accuracy of the bomb depended upon you positioning the aircraft as accurately as you could in the preconditioned um, uh, uh, parameters that you knew you had to achieve. So now going over to your F-18 or even your F-35, which obviously you're experienced in, and I'm not after anything here other than what's the tradecraft like? That was my tradecraft, and that was what you tried as an FCI to get across to younger pilots. And all that mattered a hell of a lot. What's the tradecraft that matters to that you as a mission commander might, or maybe as a mission instructor might emphasise to young pilots that these are your tradecraft factors.
Yeah, I guess as the technology has progressed, the naturally weapon employment has become more automated and simplified. That said, there's still many gotchas in employing a precision guided munition today, and particularly in the Hornet. Um, the the integration of those weapons wasn't always perfect. But for say a weapon like a GB-38, which is essentially a coordinate killer, you could it was super critical that you put in the exact location of the target, so that you had to do second checks, and we had procedures around making sure we had entered the coordinate accurately. How you received that coordinate mattered, or generated that coordinate mattered. So we had to know that the pilot in Ocra had to have a deep understanding of their weapon system and exactly how they generated coordinates with their targeting pod, because in certain conditions, altitudes, distances, glancing angles, you wouldn't be generating a coordinate as accurately as possible, and therefore that could generate a miss. So there were accurate flying was still a constant. You still had to fly into the basket on speed at an appropriate altitude for the weapons release. And then post weapons release, if you were guiding a weapon in with your designating laser, then there was almost a bomb aiming aspect to it as well, with how you could maintain the laser spot on the target at the desired point, and that you weren't going to overfly the target where the pod might spiral out of control and lose its gimbals. And you could maintain sight to the target for the entire time of the flight of the weapon, which could be around 40 or so seconds. So there was a lot of planning, a lot of understanding of how those systems related, and how you could get an accurate coordinate into the jet through offboard sensors or by generating one yourself and then guiding the weapon in post-release. It wasn't maybe as exciting as down the dive with the target behind the green dot, and as you open fire and strafe, although there were targets that were strafed in Operation OKRA. Most of the weapons were through precision guided munitions, JDAM and laser guided munitions, which still required a lot of skill and focus.
So the tradecraft is just as intense, but it's just different. But
Yeah, and in the back
still intense.
in the back of your mind, you always had the FCI on your shoulder saying you're 10 foot off altitude and you're 5 knots slow. So pick it up.
Obviously, it was a very stress. Despite the fact maybe there were no air defence, there was still very stressful points that you guys had to handle. When you came back to Australia, did you find that it was hard to adapt to the Australian environment, in the sense that those threats and those problems that you had to face had been left in the Middle East? Did you find that a big difference in your temperament to come back to Australian flying? Not the joy of it, just the pressure on you.
It's a good question. I didn't, but my experience wasn't consistent, I'm sure, with everyone. But I've struggled with some of those perspectives previously, so maybe I was more attuned to it after coming home from Ocra. But I think it comes down to, for my experience, the fact that I was there with a clear purpose. There was no shadow of a doubt morally in my mind what I was doing was right. And also that I was there with my mates, with my squadron, preparing and flying missions together. I think that made a huge difference. And I compare that to previous experiences where I've deployed in non-flying roles, to Afghanistan, for example, where I was the only Air Force member of a unit supporting ground operations in Afghanistan. Returning from that mission, I felt was more jarring, even though I wasn't exposed to the same threats or the same stresses or pressures. And I put that down to the fact that you belong to a team doing that mission matters, I think, in the mental health aspects post-mission, which was something I lacked in 2008. And I was definitely conscious of, but didn't feel in 15, 16, I think for that very reason. It was very much a team effort. And I was mindful of those who were supporting us that weren't part of our squadron, that they also had that support or felt part of the team, because it is, I think, a very protective layer for coming home.
Thank you. I talked to a lot of people in my life about exactly what you were just talking about, not to do with flying aeroplanes, just in handling life. And I think that's a really top thing to finish with. So thanks, Tim. That was good. I really enjoyed that.
Thanks, Peter. No, thank you.
If you've enjoyed this chat, then please subscribe to our channel. Our channel supports veterans directly and indirectly. We are all volunteers. Additionally, if you go to the description of this particular video, you'll see links to the Australian Military Aviation History Association and links to Air Force Association New South Wales, and you'll see the subscription button to subscribe to our premium aviation magazine.